Bam.
This is Tim Kennedy, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Like a pro, the boss coming on the show, man. I appreciate you doing this. You know,
Pleasure.
you've been on the show before. Scott Husing was on here co-hosting with me way back when, but now you've written this book, Scars and Stripes, and I love it. I've watched a couple of your recent interviews, and I thought I would just dive in with a couple of common traits that you and I have, and just for the audience, for a lot of folks who don't know who I am, who are from your world, maybe watching, we both have a lot of combat time. I was more on the counterintelligence collection side. You're on the special operations side, but we work together quite a lot. And so some of the things that we've both gathered is, well, obviously you need to have like be accountable for your own stuff to each other, right? Like I'm going to handle my job at, and look, if I sit down with the team and I'm going to support you guys got to know who I am. Anytime I've been through like a murder board, it's like I know my stuff. You guys are like, okay, no questions. Let's go back, get back to work. So we have these things, so that independent accountability to each other, but also grace, right? And finding how to. It's easy to be gracious to people that you love and know, but when it's hard and when you're like, the last thing I want to do is be gracious. How did you come across grace and this independent accountability that we seem to have in common?
Uh, it was shown towards me. I don't think I was a very generous, kind, patient, empathetic person, and I hurt people that I cared about, and I hurt people I didn't care about unnecessarily. And inversely, I had people show me grace as an example of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of kindness and generosity and sincerity. I say there's no worse form of insult than just disregard. There's no worse insult than indifference. And grace is the opposite of that. It is intentionality, and having been disregarded, yeah, that stings, and I don't want anybody to have that same feeling.
That another common trait that guys like us have is we can work like look on a team, in a team, SEAL team, Delta, anything like that. It's alphas with alphas, right? And you have to sort out how to work with each other in the fighting world that you're in. You have to believe you're the best in the world to get into the ring and compete against the best people in the world. But it's different when you're trying to go out and do something that you can't just compel through force or charm. And you've got to figure out where it is. And maybe you're not the guy for this meeting. Maybe it's the other guy, or all these different things you have to deal with. And you can't be the best at everything on a team. There's no way.
No, no. I mean, you could try, but you definitely play, and that's the point of the team, is to play into the strengths. To have some guys that are good at one thing and other guys that are good at other things. And I wanted to be good at everything, and it's clear you can't be. And I wish I would have focused on what I was good at.
You also want to minimize your weaknesses. So, yeah, where do you spend the training time on the things that you're good at, or do this? There is so much that you guys have to master. Like they want us to be great at a language, but how can you be great at a language when you've been to 6 different continents, or whatever it is, right? You're trying to go out and do all these things. You have to pick up an ability to balance your capabilities. Would you advise yourself differently based upon what like you ended up doing? Like, hey, I want you to focus more on this, young Tim.
Yeah, I would have. When the team sergeant asked, "Hey, what school do you want to go to?" I answered with what school I wanted to go to. The right answer is, "Hey, boss, what deficiency do we have in the team that I could go and learn about so I'd be more of an asset?" Hey, boss, what are our weaknesses? What are my weaknesses? What do you think is the most important school for me to come back from and to be value added to our team? Not like, oh, yeah, Halo school, sniper school, Sephardic. Like, what a selfish little prick.
So if you could trade out one school and do one that you absolutely would not want to do, but would have been required, what would that swap be?
Command and staff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got 2 trips where I got to be a sniper. And I love sniper school. I love being a sniper. I have 20 trips where I'm advising generals and ambassadors and, defense attaches on how and what they should be doing on in the military sector. Like currently in Eastern Europe, I am, like they're asking questions about how to build an NCO corps.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, oh, you want me to help estimate your range? Cause I'm really good at that. No, man, I need to be able to bring in drill instructors and show you how to develop, a company of drill instructors that can go out and teach the very basics of how to be an infantryman. Like how organizationally do you employ a combat unit like an infantry unit or the 18 Charlies, any of those things that I omitted in early training to go to cool things.
Yeah, and a lot of these cool things you may never use. And let's just use sniper as an example. Most snipers rarely ever, if ever, use their sniper skills. It's not like in a video game where you're out there and you're just reaping. Like you have. It's maybe like the third thing or fourth thing that you do in your skill set with any kind of commonality. Now, I'm speaking. I'm not a sniper, but I know, like, I've been out, like, oh, you're sniper qualified. You never got to do anything on this combat tour that involved being a sniper, right? So when you look at these skill sets, how valuable is sniper school? I mean, how often in the average sniper career, how often are they actually squeezing that trigger on a target that has been identified?
Yeah, I mean that is a misconception about sniper school that squeezing the trigger is what sniper school is. The vast majority of what you do at sniper school is is target recognition, learning how to actually collect intelligence, how to create target packages that I can submit to guys like you. Like, hey, here's pictures of targets. Here's the positive ID on the person that you guys told us to go and find. Here's the person, the place, and the time that we last saw him. Here's the equipment. Here's the type of equipment that they have, the number of personnel that they have. Like lots of like if you're going to build that comprehensive battle picture, that we'll call it a operational picture. Most of that information is going to be gathered from forward observers, and snipers are the best forms of forward observers. And a really useful employment of snipers is in that forward observer role. A lot of snipers go on to learn how to call in airstrikes. So you have that forward operating guy that's dropping bombs on top of Taliban. That's a pretty rad thing to do. Calling corrections off of artillery, naval gunfire. These are all really cool skills that you bring to the battlefield as a sniper. On the pulling the trigger side, everybody dreams of doing it. The opportunities are few and far between, but thank God we have them when that time is needed. When you look at Mogadishu, when you look at Fallujah, when you look at Sadr City, you see Army snipers, Ranger snipers, and Special Forces snipers that are slaying, and had it not been for guys like that, had it not been for the Shugart and Gordons, it's difficult to even imagine what the battlefield would have looked like in their absence.
Yeah, it's akin to like mass deployment of airborne. Like you don't really need it except for when you need it. And you have to have that capability.
Yeah,
it's interesting sniping. We had I'm in a distant district in Afghanistan, in South Central, so it's pretty rough. A lot of Taliban, but they're not showing up for the fight, right? So what they would do is the Taliban would show up in the community that we were trying to influence. They would have a firefight with us every night. It's like, why are they shooting out of small arms range against us? It's one of my job. Pete, figure this out. And so we were looking at it. And we were kind of sorting it out. And really, what we determined was it was a messaging campaign. They could say whatever they wanted to say every night. Hey, we killed 2 Americans last night. You don't want to be next. That kind of thing. And what the sniper team was deployed to do is they went on our little hilltop that we had, and they brought the Beret out. And when those guys would show up, they wouldn't shoot those guys. because of the limitations of the row, but they would shoot around them to talk back. Boom, and they quit showing up for that little performance every night. They would like every night they would do this. So here's a case where the sniping team was a communication device to the locals and to the enemy.
Yeah, an effective one.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, so this is the thing I'm always interested in. You and I know how, like, doctrinally, how an ODA is supposed to operate. You guys are focused on FID, foreign internal defense. So that's not what we all get to do, though, right? The nature of commands and trying to get work, you know, the SEALs become Green Berets and Green Berets become SEALs in terms of their deployability, where they go. You know, you rip into a SEAL-based CJ SOTF, and now it's going to be your guys' thing for a while. So you're really swapping missions, but doctrinally, you guys are really different animals. Is that a good thing to be that modular and interreplaceable? Because I would submit that SEALs are not, from direct experience, they're not as savvy to the cultural side of things as you guys are. And I know you guys can kick doors, but SEALs, like, that's what they specialize in doing in so many cases.
Yeah, I do wish, you know, after 20 years at war, I think there was just a degree of deployment fatigue, and there was operational creep, where you had very specific units that were very talented at specific things, but because of the demand on special operations, and this was a very high level strategic failure, which was the misuse and the incorrect employment of special operations into theaters for the incorrect mission. And this operational creep, where, man, if a SEAL can do it, a Green Beret can do it. No, 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 they can't. You know, and inversely, like, there are things that we should be doing that there is no way an ASVAB or a SEAL or a Ranger should even be at the same location, because they're going to be doing serious damage to the rapport that we're trying to build in this long-term relationship. You know, in the 3 to 6 months that, you know, would be working with somebody in the soft model, in the special operations forces model, we would be handing the reins off to our friendly force within months of being there, and we're not even kicking in the doors. They're kicking in the doors. You know, in the advise, assist, accompany, you know, like, we're not even accompanying. At some point, you know, we're advising, we're assisting, and then we're initially accompanying. Then by the end of it, we're like, all right, you guys got this. You know, have a great time.
One of the advantages I had is I would stay in an area, right? So you guys would get that unit up to proficiency with weapons and all that kind of stuff. And invariably the next unit would come in and be like, "That's a shit show around here." And sure enough, like, the locals would be shooting like terribly, you know? And so there would be this thing where we couldn't hold that lesson. And another thing is we were obsessed with teaching things that we didn't ourselves use. I don't know how many times you used curved line distance on a map before a patrol, or done a sand table. And you guys might do more sand tables, but, like, these are things we taught all the time, and then would with our partners absolutely not do them if the sergeant major wasn't around, and we would go do our job, right? And so we had this very confusing program if you were on the ground and you're, you know, the indigenous people that you're trying to train. It must seem infuriating to them to constantly be going back to square.
Yeah, I really stuck to, and was regimented and disciplined, like, back to intentionality. You know, if there's some inconsistencies, if there is, you know, lack of communication, collaboration with friendly forces, command level, you know, communicating up, down, and out, making sure everybody's doing the right thing. I definitely want to practice what I preach. And is, as a Green Beret, you know, rapport is so important. You know, being embedded and being part of this group. That, you know, if there's some hypocrisy, do as I say, not as I do. I don't have rapport with those guys. They're going to look at me, even if I'm just doing a unilateral mission. They will still look at us and see whether we're doing it, if we're doing the things that they taught them or not. And I always want to be on that moral high ground of making sure that I am doing as I say.
One of the so I was working on another camp again in Afghanistan, but in, like, the capital district. And got, you know, it's always great. And the guy in my business, if the commander is like, "Pete, come sit on my couch, talk to me," or, "Hey, Pete, I need you to go help, you know, Colonel Tony with the Green Beret on." he needs your help specifically. It's great to have that mission. And so you have this instant rapport, like colonel to colonel recommendation. You see, you come and you sit down in the camp and you're like, hey, there's a lot of Afghan police here and Afghan border patrol, all these different people that are here. And these guys are awesome partners. They're on it. However, keep one in the pipe at all times and don't put your pistol on safe. Make sure. And so, and I know this world, like you've got to go dine with these guys and try to, like me and my buddy Rich would try to work out with them. And our job's not to train these guys. We're going off the camp and trying to find things out. But you are living with these guys and they need to see you and have respect for you. But that also exposes you to potentially being a target. People don't understand how complex this modern combat world is.
Yeah, it's been this way for a long time. The axis of evil and the allies, with a clear delineation of our enemy lines. Those days are gone. It's the era of the insurgency. It's the era of the unconventional warfare. If you look at Ukraine right now, you could argue not in feet, not in kilometers, but in miles of contested territories. Is where is the actual enemy line? Where are friendly troops? Who are friendly troops? What do sympathizers look like? Are there going to be Ukrainians that are sympathizers to Russia? Are there going to be Russians that are sympathizers to Ukraine? In that Donetsk region, like that overlap of having to understand the nuances of those cultures, and also the history and why it's so important that it could be life or death. It could really determime who is going to be successful in a battlefield.
That history part, man, it's just the motherfucker because you can read a book. So when I deployed to Bosnia, we got our brief ahead of time. And this is the craziest company ever. So we had a battalion. It had, operate or just like operations personnel. Like these guys weren't going to go outside the wire. This is for the audience. And we had a huge company that was Echo Company 51st Regiment, right? But they were nestled within our battalion, and they did not want any part of the intel mission because these guys are Rangers and they're Lursk guys. And then you had what was then being closed down, a company of interrogators, and they were going to get rid of interrogators in the late 90s. And so those guys are being rolled into our counterintelligence company. It's just the craziest battalion ever. But prior to deployment to Bosnia, they're like, hey, here's the last 50 years of, and here's 100 years back, and here's 400 years back. And then you realized we've just picked a side, and how these folks had intermarried, who they were mad at, why they were mad at it. And there was so much inter and intra fighting that it was really impossible to reliably do it. And I think Eastern Ukraine, we have the same problem where it's like some of these folks are Russian and they're always going to be Russian. Maybe they want to be part of Ukraine. Maybe they don't. You would have to, it's like Puerto Rico. You have let's become part of the US, leave us the fuck alone. And, I don't know, status quo, right? So how do you sort these things out when you're in this environment and then have an enemy that's trying to kill people?
Yeah. And, but also I pity, and it's so American of us to think that, like you said, we could just pick a side. They'd be like, oh, here we are. This conflict has been going on for 400 years, and now we're going to drop in here and be like, all right, well, this is what's best for our interests. And it's so much more complex than that. But I believe that it matters all the way down to the person. America is strong because of the collective, the individuals, and like the people part. And for you to understand America, I mean, it is impossible for you to break down all of the different cultures, all of the different societies, all the different language, all the different motivators, all the different centers of gravities for each of these different cultures. From the border in Texas to the border in Canada, those are both sovereign borders. You could not talk about a more distant, completely disconnected style of living compared to Southwest Texas to Northeast or Northwest Washington. Yeah. Different worlds, and both Americans, both border cities, with virtually opposite styles of living.
International Falls, Minnesota, is the absolute antithesis of, Del Rio, Texas, right? Yeah. And it's just so crazy. And I've been out to Del Rio, Texas, and you know this, you can leave San Antonio, which is squarely in the middle of West Texas, and drive for 200 miles west, and then get to the sign that says, go another 100 miles west. And then you go another 100 miles west, and then like, and then go another 100 miles west. And now you're in West Texas still. Like it's a
Yeah.
massive area and it's so distant. It is an enormously challenging problem to solve. And I'm kind of laying the groundwork here because I want to get up to the strategic side. But I'm just illustrating the demands on a guy like you or a guy like me if we go somewhere and try to do something tactically, right? And the skills that you actually have to be good at. I've never had to, in my role, I would never have to call in a 9-line medevac or call for close air support. Now, maybe I'm in a fight and it happens, but I promise the person that in the radio is going to be like, "Oh, you're Pete. You don't know the first thing about calling for close air support. Let's work on this together." Because if I'm calling in, it's bad, right? But I've been trained that skill, gosh, a dozen times, right? And so you have these things that we have nothing to do with what we're doing, and then the things that we pick, there is a good chance that some young 18 series warrior is going to be sitting across from a Russian partner in the next 10 to 15 years. And they're going to have to break down the barriers that we have built with our new stance towards Russia when they're partnered on some project. Clearly, don't give a fuck about Libya and what happens to humans there. We don't care about Burma and what happens there, but we're desperate to deal with Ukraine over, say, Yemen. And I just that puts an unfair burden on dudes like us that have to go deal with that and too whimsical.
Yeah. But in the like the geopolitical stratosphere that is, comparing Ukraine to Yemen, we're talking like regional compared to the entire earth.
Okay.
If, let's say, the Ukrainians had not been as prepared to conduct an insurgency and to fight back the invaders as they were in February, March, and April, the new Russian line, instead of them claiming those few territories, were all the way to Lviv. We're talking the new USSR is on the border of Poland, and they are now looking past Poland into what? Czech Republic. It is wild to think about how far communism would have spread in Eastern Europe had Putin been successful in Ukraine. Had he been able to reach the harbor, what that would have looked like in Odessa, had he been able to shut off 80% of the GDP out of it, how much oil and gas he would control in that harbor, how much freight he would control. It's one of the few access points to that entire region. So, man, I'll fight communism everywhere that it pops its little head up, because if you know history, the end result of communism is always death, is always starvation, and is always genocide. So, and as we have seen it be the case in Ukraine, where there's mass graves, there's torturing of soldiers, and that wouldn't have just been in eastern Ukraine. That would have been all the way through the whole entire country, to include the capital of Kyiv, to the last proper industrialized city in western Ukraine, being Lviv, to the border of Poland and Krakow. Like, I can't wrap my head around what that looks like, to see USSR and communism and Russian troops all the way at the border of Poland. Poland! Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you think about how like our policy towards Poland has gone back and forth and how much, and the Baltic states too. We're so simple with this. Like Kaliningrad is west of the western portion of the Baltic state, Russia, and so it's a complex thing. And when we have these questionable decisions regarding foreign policy, and look, you can look at President Trump, President Biden, President Obama, President. None of these guys were terribly good at foreign policy, and so we sort of have this chaotic world. But really, I don't know how much can a president or their advisors get right. I mean, you don't have to say this, but Secretary Blinken, uh, Secretary Secretary Austin, President Biden, these guys are terrible at this aspect of the game. Maybe they're good at something else. But what was the last thing that General Austin or Secretary Austin won? Not good at winning.
Man, I really like winning, and it's we're in a hard spell right now. And we have definitely been slow to respond in every theater that we've been in, whether it was the evacuation of Afghanistan or the invasion into Ukraine. If positioning of us in and around Taiwan, these have all been slow responses, and coming from a force where speed, surprise, and violence of action is commonplace, it really hurts to watch anything else but that. And this has been anything else but speed, surprise, and violence of action.
Yeah, that's true. Is it possible to be too proactive in that world? Like if we start
No,
messing with the Straits of Malacca and get a little over.
no, no, you cannot be over prepared. That is an impossible thing. When we're looking for stability and security with our partner nations, it is you cannot be too prepared to go to war. You cannot be too prepared to be a natural deterrent. The only way that you are a natural deterrent is if you are too prepared. There's one of the soft truths, one of the special operation forces truths, like one that we know, is that you cannot respond to a crisis after a crisis has already occurred. Like you cannot train special operations forces to be special operations after a crisis occurred. You cannot respond to a crisis, especially at like the national strategic level. This responsiveness is so slow. You have to be preemptive in the training and the preparation for each of those things.
Yeah. Are we asking too much of you guys? I had Michelle Black
Yes.
on the show, and her husband's team. That can happen anywhere, right? You guys are always under provision because you can't be provisioned enough, and that goes into this question that you said yes to. So, are we asking too much of our soft community to make SEALs not be SEALs, to make you guys go further and further and further out into the bush to do things? And then what is the right amount?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions as to sustainability and durability of our special operations forces. We know that we have been overutilized. We have been used on the wrong missions in the wrong capacity, and it's never too late though for us to have a adjustment, and I think we have had an adjustment. So we'll see what happens in the coming years, but we have been used too much and we have been worn down.
The one of the things I think that's good. So let me back up. I had Sebastian Younger on the show, and he said, "Hey, listen, you guys have done a lot of stuff. This is almost 10 years ago now. You guys have done a lot of stuff. I need you guys to come home and lead us internally, get in the middle, and rally us there." And those aren't his exact words, but that's what he meant. Like get us to get along with each other. And I've taken that challenge pretty seriously. And I got to tell you, it sucks in the middle, getting pointed at from both sides. It's a good indicator of success when everybody's pissed off at me, but it's also hard to rally folks in the middle if we're making everybody mad and we're not winning enough people in the center.
Yeah, it's these are tough questions, and they're ones that are discussed at the joint chief staff level, the strategic level, and our strategic guidance coming back from the White House and from the Secretary of Defense. And we like funny that we're circling back to Grace. What does it look like for a secretary to look at his special operations forces and to show them grace? It's a group that we expect perfection from, even though it's a group that as a collective is a collective of individual humans. Yes, extraordinarily trained and extraordinarily prepared and extraordinarily screened, but are we expecting too much? Yes. Are we asking too much? Yes. And are we preparing them enough or giving them enough tools? No. And that's it. We're in this kind of juxtaposition of we have to be leveraging them in the right ways and giving them enough resources to be successful in the missions that we finally do ask of them. Because when we do ask them to go and do these things, they have to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice. One of the things if like I was president, the thing I would probably do first in terms of foreign policy is just get more foreign policy people. And by this, I don't mean people from Georgetown or the Kennedy School of Government. God bless, those are all good people. But I need to get some of you older Green Berets, guys that have a savvy to how to sit down and have a meeting. One of my tricks was to, we're gonna have chai until you beg me to do business. Like I'm just gonna be your friend for as long as you can stand it until you're like, Pete, can we please get down to business? Because we need more people who have that adeptness, right? And again, our Kennedy School of Government people, they're great, but boy, they are often the least effective and often the most unaware person in the room. So President Pete would change that and put a lot more people away from the Capitol, out in the villages, learning and talking to these folks to understand whatever this place is that we're trying to stabilize. What would you do if you're President Tim? How would you? What's one thing you would change?
Um, I feel as if we're failing in communicating clearly to society as a whole. If you look at our shortages in recruiting, if you look at our retention of military, you see some very frightening, some very scary, some very national security level worries. And that is mostly, I think, a failure on our part to express what is it that the military does. And we do some really wonderful, great things, not just nation building. No, we're not just looking for weapons of mass destruction. No, we're not just kicking in doors. When you said foreign internal defense, what does that look like? What are submissions of foreign internal defense where we have psychological operations and civil affairs that are going out and doing med caps that are, showing the local voodoo doctor how to actually do a cleaning of someone's teeth. Something so basic as that like these people haven't had their teeth cleaned in their life. How to actually purify water, how to dig a well, how to irrigate, how to give vaccines to your animals. Lots of very commonplace things. Like these are missionaries in uniforms. They're going all over the world, and because a more stable and a more secure world is a better and a more stable and secure place for Americans to do business. And if we are capitalists, and we do believe that the model that we espouse, that we want to see fertile soils and fertile grounds for us to operate in. Nobody knows that we do these things. They think that we're just like flying on some secret Black Hawk to kill bin Laden. Yeah. Which is like the least thing. And if we never have to do that, if we do all of this other stuff right.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there, right? For that, do this stuff right. Man, there's so much you just said in there that talking about the ability to clean someone's teeth. I'm about to have a professor on, and he wrote about this guy Cabeza de Vaca, who was one of the. They ended up walking naked because there is no way to make clothes or get clothes, right?
Yeah.
It's a time before. There's no cotton mill in San Antonio because there is no San Antonio. And he's just walking across at him. And the trip starts with 300 people. They end up with 4 that survive. And these guys become, this is no shit, they become faith healers. And because they're able to do things, simple things, pull an arrow out of a body or just blow. And these guys have to believe in God. Like they're blowing for all their heart to help this person, and everybody's feeling better. And they were vouchsafing these 4 dudes as they walked across basically the U.S. again, naked, barely provisioned. And so, if you can do that, that is a human thing, right? Where they'll say, "Man, these guys are all right. They inoculated my goats." Helped us dig a well. We got to ask, like, where that well should be. Do you guys need a well? How do you get water right now? But once we get that stuff figured out, you can reliably do it, but you can't take on every insult, every bad thing. We can't put our culture on somebody else. I've written a paper about female empowerment in combat zones, right? And bottom line is we shouldn't do it because we don't take the time to understand the condition of women and what it would take to come in thinking that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a love everyone inclusive guy, but I also know that some people have gifts and others don't. We can't go to everywhere and teach everything, but we can be strategic about where we are teaching people, what we are teaching people, where we are teaching them, and why we are teaching them. And if I'm looking to stabilize Northwest Africa, if we know that we have hotbeds of radicals in Mali, so am I gonna? But I know Morocco is a pretty stable place, great tourism. If I'm looking at Mauritania and Burkina Faso and Nigeria, I take a couple of teams, I drop a couple of teams that are setting up a couple of forward operating bases that go out and teach. They do a couple of key leader engagements. They go and teach a couple of strategic warlords and village mayors about how to do things, empower them, immediately build rapport. Those mayors are then supporting the current government. Now the government's a little bit more stable. The 5 more villages have water. It's just like in 3 to 6 months, we had a huge impact in an entire region of the world that has been historically very unstable and unsafe. So, we can do it. We know how to do it. We just have to have the time and resources to do it.
Hey, I know you got to go, so let me just throw one more thing at you, and then we'll just wrap it. I've written this fantastic book, Scars and Stripes. The link is right there. Here's what I always ask people to do: buy 2 and read it with a friend, and then let's talk about it. One of the buzzwords of the day is authenticity, and I know you come across as an authentic guy. I was trying to find a picture of you, like not being Tim Kennedy, but you're always Tim Kennedy, and so there you always wear your shirt off, or with a gun, or wrestling somebody. And I was like, where's the lover guy, right? How do people with that? Because you can't try to be authentic; you just have to be it. How does people develop an aura of authenticity that is genuine?
Yeah, I think they should be punished and humiliated anytime they're fake. I don't know another way to do it. I have enough friends and role models and mentors around me where if I'm pulling any shenanigans, if I'm out there doing things that is not within my wheelhouse of expertise, dude, they will call it on me in a heartbeat. And I mean shameful. Matt Smith will walk through this door right there and he'll be like, bro, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you crazy talking like that? You don't know nothing about that. And like, oh, you're right, man. I'm so sorry. Barry and Carl stand right there outside that door. Both those dudes will come in here in a heartbeat and explain to me exactly every single which way I messed up. And if you don't have that in your life, you don't have that accountability, if you don't have those truth sayers, you got to find better friends.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up on that. Hey, where does everybody go to interact with you on socials? At Instagram, where do you want folks to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all of them, Twitter, but it's all Tim Kennedy MMA. So they're all verified. So don't go to there are so many fakes. Facebook and Twitter get a handle on that, the bots. But it's Tim Kennedy MMA, and you can chat at me, you can tweet at me, you can DM me. I'm on all of them.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. Let me wrap this thing up.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much